pessoal, hoje temos aqui o Vasil à minha direita e em baixo temos o Alex, ok? Eles foram estudantes na Universidade de Coventry e vêm falar um bocadinho como é que nós podemos organizar o nosso treino quando temos uma atividade, vamos dizer, futebol, pádel, outro desporto, com o treino que fazemos no ginásio, Hipertrofia, ok? Hipertrofia, como é que podemos maximizar ambas as coisas, ok? Vou começar a falar em português para eles começarem a entrar, ok? O episódio vai ser mais uma vez em inglês. Se tiverem dúvidas e não conseguirem ouvir bem no Spotify, vão ao YouTube e vão ter as legendas, ok? So guys, I introduced the podcast. What I start to say, and now we want to hear a little bit is about yourselves, okay? I will start with Vasil here. So Vasil, just speak a little bit about yourself. How do you enter in the sports world? And you are in the fitness industry too, so how did you get to where you are now?
Okay, it's great. Okay, so to start, I am Vasil, and I've been always, guys, into sports since I've been growing up. I've always played a lot of different sports, football, basketball, combat sports, etc. But the problem was that I was always the small kid in my class. I've matured very late. So even people who were, let's say, young with me, with 1 or 2 years, they were always faster, bigger, stronger. So I find it really difficult to be competitive with them because my physical abilities weren't really much. So in that stage, I knew how important is physical training and how important are your physical qualities to be able to perform good in your sport. So since then, I want to find a way of how I can get better. So I said, okay, let's start now training the gym and so on. And now looking back, I think I've done a lot of wrong things, a lot of bad things, but still I managed to get some results in, because I didn't know from where to get good source of information. I just find some stuff online, which I didn't know how accurate is information, and I tried it myself and so on. So I did some good training. I guess some good results, but I want more. I want to learn more and so on. And so I wanted to kind of go to this road, but I didn't know what to study and so on. So around high school, the last grade, or the 12th grade, I was thinking now, should I just go to work or should I start doing some higher education, go into uni and so on. So I always want to be a bit more informed about different topics and get a higher education. So I was thinking what I should study. But I wasn't never really a very good student at school, I was lazy, didn't pay much attention. And throughout all the subjects, all the disciplines like engineering, maths, medicine, and so on, I didn't really like anything, So I didn't know what to do. So I went to this agency, and they work in a partnership with many different higher education schools in the UK, France, Germany, Portugal, Spain, And I went through all of them and all of the courses. And as I said, I have already loved sports so much. I'm doing sports and training my whole life. So I was looking to do anything with sports. So I saw sports science, sports therapy, physiotherapy. So I started thinking what course I should do. That I would be most interested in. So that's why I came here in the UK by some chance and started doing the sport and exercise science degree at College and University. Then we did the masters with you guys. Both of you were in my group. I think we were a very good team. We're having some good times. And yeah, that was really how I came to UK, how I started doing this education. But about my experience, in my second year, I started working as a personal trainer. So I have been working for maybe 3 years now as a personal trainer in Coventry, and I also have done some work experience, some placements. One of them with Coventry University with the boxing club. So me and Antonio, we were doing the same placement. So for all the people who are listening to this podcast, we were doing the same thing. And it's quite fun because I've been doing martial arts for a few years now, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and some MMA. So I really like this placement, like to do more research about boxing, how to train athletes and so on. That has been my passion. And it was good about the placement that we had a lot of freedom. We basically did everything. We did all the screening, all the fitness assessments, all the fitness assessments of the planning, programming, and coaching. It was just amazing, And that was it really. So in a nutshell, that has been my journey so far, and now I'm looking forward in the future to work more with athletes, especially with combat sports. But I don't mind working with team sports as well as with other types of athletes because at the end of the day, strength and conditioning is for everybody. It should be only for one area of people. But yeah, that's me, and that's my short summary of my life so far.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much, Vasil. Alex, your turn. Speak a little bit about yourself. How did you get here to what you are today? How did you get to the sports world and the industry? So just tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, with pleasure, thanks. So I'm Alex. I started doing various sports from a very young age. So I think the age of 6 or 7, I started doing sports, and I did a lot of different ones. I used to lose interest very quickly. So most of them I didn't do for more than a year or so. At some point, I started doing basketball by chance, and I started loving it. So that became my first ever passion, especially in terms of sports. And obviously, I was super hyped about it. Always used to do that. Before I actually sign up to play basketball, I used to be the chubby kid in school. Then I became the skinny kid. So again, started from being super fat to extremely skinny. Then obviously, as I started progressing in basketball, I realized that I can't stay skinny, even though it's better than being chubby, because you need to be strong and because basketball has a lot of physical clashes. So I had to anticipate those. So a friend of mine got me into resistance training, which was meant to be sport specific for the sport. So he did basketball as well, pretty good athlete himself. And obviously, I ended up being the high school team's captain as well, because obviously resistance training helped me a lot in terms of being physically stronger, quicker, explosive, and so on. So I, at some point, even had the dream of becoming a professional player. Unfortunately, that didn't happen because of different reasons. But obviously, in time, I realized that, similar to Vasil, if I knew the things I know now back then, or at least had a coach who did, things could have been different. Obviously, it's one of those what if moments. But that's essentially what I kind of figured out in time. So now I've decided that if I can't obviously progress as an athlete, then I will be able to progress as a coach and help other people, especially young athletes, reach their goals. So obviously, after the basketball dream was broken, I carried on doing resistance training as more of a bodybuilding style type of training. So aiming more to have aesthetic gains and look better, just be fit. So obviously, in due time, obviously, like in terms of body, I became more average in terms of like I wasn't skinny, but I wasn't fat. I was like kind of normal, okay, and always trying to do better and better. Obviously, a few years after, I started doing a bit of powerlifting as well. So I did that for a little bit, tried on CrossFit as well, and then finally specialized in Olympic weightlifting, which became my second passion. And I think in total, I've done up to 9 years of resistance training where I've done bits and bobs of various things and disciplines. Then in terms of higher education, similar to Vasil, I signed up for an agency to study abroad, ended up studying Coventry, did an undergrad in sports science and a master's in strength conditioning. Obviously, that's how I know Vasil from the undergrad, and then obviously you, Antonio, know from the masters, which is great. Besides that, obviously, because of my other passions and lifting, I did coach qualifications in powerlifting and weightlifting. So that was quite fun. I think was useful. Um, and since I've started uni, I've obviously done my best to gain experience in the field of strength and conditioning. So I've done team sports, professional level, some university level, school level athletes, even master level a little bit. So I've tried doing various things. Obviously, work with as many different people as I can. Like Vasil said, strength conditioning should be about one area of people, one sport. So even though I have my passions, I still try to learn from other sports. Um, and obviously, again, as I mentioned earlier, now my goal is to obviously progress in strength and conditioning, but also help other young athletes reach their goals the way I wanted to reach them earlier in my life. And essentially, that's what I'm aiming to do now, and just gain further experience, just become a better coach.
Good, perfect. Thank you. Hope that everyone knows you, and maybe some of the athletes will call you after this podcast. So basically, we have some topics that are all related with one and the other. So let's start with the one that, let's say, even if the sports are different, you have people that do a specific sport and want to do a kind of extra resistant training to enhance their capacity on each sport. It can be football, basketball, judo, weightlifting, jiu-jitsu. So I want you we can start with Alex now, to give us an idea of, okay, what that kind of people that have e-sport first and the resistant training after. So the main goal is the performance in the sport. How they can organize their resistant training, and what kind of tips would you give to that kind of people?
Right. So for me, as we all know, it does depend on a lot of things. I think the main thing is to understand the aim of the team and the coach, and also how many times a week can that athlete or group of athletes spare to have a strength conditioning session with a coach, or even like a personal trainer who can train them. So I think those are the first few things which need to be organized and understood, just because every manager, coach, or team has different philosophy in terms of how many times they want to train. Obviously, we know that different sports have, different goals in mind, and the amount of times you have competition are different. Some sports have one per week or two. Some have one per year. Obviously, you doing judo, you would understand that you might not necessarily have that many opportunities to have competition. And in some cases, you have tournaments, you might have more. Now, generally speaking, I have to be kind of keep it a bit short. I would prescribe around 4 sessions a week, which would obviously vary in volume and intensity depending on the sport. And the sessions which are more like sport-specific technical sessions, because the first priority is to do the sessions which are linked to the sport, and then if you have any time left and the opportunity to then do some resistance training, which obviously has the intention of implementing the development of the sport. Because, for example, from my experience, when I did basketball and did sport-specific sessions, obviously they helped me to become better. However, at some point when the season started, I didn't change anything. So if you imagine me being maintaining like a higher volume intensity, I tried to kind of not only maintain that, but kind of go even greater than that when the season started, which was at some point awful, because you do start to overtrain, your muscles become fatigued. The coach is like, what's going on? You weren't that slow before. Even yourself, you're thinking, what was going on? So that's like a thing to understand when and how you need to train, and how it needs to be changed according to the season. Obviously, the different ways of structuring a resistance training program. I will probably focus on alternating between upper and lower body, and then making sure that within the sessions, the split between pushing and pulling exercises is roughly equal. Since I've noticed, even from my experience and experience of others, that people focus too much, for example, lower body, they focus on quad dominant exercises, they don't focus on the hamstrings, then they're thinking, why did they get injured? Obviously, if you have imbalances and some muscles are way stronger than the others can't support, they can't support the other muscles in certain movements. So obviously, as we know, ACL, for example, is a cause of in such case. Whatever happens in terms of the program, because different programs are for different people, but I think the main thing is just to keep it simple as possible. Some people have heard that a lot, but I think there needs to be an even greater emphasis, because we all know that on social media you get these people saying, oh yeah, do this, and this will help you reach your goal, and this new fancy exercise which I've designed, and obviously it's more for getting popularity, but it's not necessarily going to help you reach your goal. So if people keep sticking to the basics, I think that they will progress eventually.
Thank you. I think that you touched on a few points in terms of time management and or is more sport specific and not just focusing on I want to have big quads, so fuck downstrings. No, I think was a good point on that. Vasil, do you want to jump in and give us a little bit your point of views in terms of this? So we have athlete. You don't need to be high level. It can just be a normal person that likes to do it, in your example, jiu-jitsu, but wants to have resistance training too. How would you organize? What kind of tips would you give to them?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I think first of all, I have to agree 100% with Alex about keeping things simple, focusing on the basics and so on. Because far too often, a lot of people who aren't that experienced in weight training, they jump to very advanced exercises and fancy exercises. So unless you have mastered all the fundamental movements and exercises like squats, hinging, pushing, pulling, carry, and single leg exercises, you won't really be able to get much benefit out of those advanced exercises. And even if you're well trained, you still won't probably have much advantage of performing those. But I think from my point of view as a start, as I said, it depends on a lot of factors. The main thing is in which part of the competitive year you are. For example, if let's say if you're a boxer, if you're doing boxing, and you have I don't know 5-6 weeks for your next match, you should already be thinking about peaking, and you should be working a lot on speed and power, and so because that's what is going to help you win in your match. You know, getting bigger biceps in those 5 weeks leading to a competition, it won't really help much. I'm sorry, but that is the real truth. You know, so that's the main thing. So on which phase of the year you are, so you can decide what training qualities you have to emphasize. If you have, let's say, a long period before the match, you start with first working on increasing your muscle mass, on hypertrophy, then maximum strength, and then you go to speed and power. So that's the first key thing. Where am I currently? Second thing is how often can I train? You know, for example, if you give more importance to the practice of the sport practice, you probably can't train 5-6 times a week, right? I might as well start with 2 or 3 training sessions a week, but you have to make sure that they are quality sessions. You know, a lot of people I see in the gyms, they go there and they waste their time in the gym 100%. You know, they do things that they won't really help them at any possible way, and it's just like a waste of time, energy, and effort. You might as well spend this more time in your gym practicing skills relevant to like your sport. I would say when it comes to training, what's important to do is to have this system. It might really work when you have hard and easy days, or high and low days. Because as Alex said, if you're doing a lot of high volume and high density training, you're feeling fatigue. You are getting slower, and you might also overtrain, which happens often in the combat sports because, from my point of view, when I've been working in this industry, a lot of time there isn't a system for the coach to work during the whole week. For example, you don't know when you have a hard session, when you have an easy session. So I might make my plan, let's say to train light on Tuesday, but I go there and we just spar for 1 hour and a half, and my body just broke down the other session. You know, so you have to have some kind of a plan, and if you can talk with the coach and have exact days for when you're gonna do some light technique work, some technical tactical work, some house sparring and so on, that can really help you make a good solid plan and gonna keep you fit and safe, and you won't maybe get injured or even trained. So when you have hard days, let's say you have hard days on Mondays and on Fridays at the start and the end of the week, and then you have a light day on, let's say, Tuesday and on Wednesday, middle of the week. I would say that you should probably put in your weight training, your resistance training sessions in the hard days. For example, you might do some resistance training in the morning, you might do your sport practice, your sparring at the evening, and then you have 2 hard and easy days, because often what happens is let's say you do your hard sessions in the gym, doing sparring and so on, but you also have hard sessions in the gym lifting weights when you're supposed to be, you have off days or easy days. Then what happens, you don't have any true hard and low days, it's all hard, which means that you're doing too much training, not getting enough rest, not getting enough recovery between the sessions. You get a low fatigue and you won't even to adapt. There is a saying I like to use a lot: stress plus recovery equals adaptation. If you take one of them two out, you won't have adaptation. So let's say if you have only stress, you're training every single day hard, but you don't have enough rest and recovery, you won't be able to adapt. But on the other side, if you have a lot of recovery, and sleep and rest, but you're not stressing the body again enough, you won't have adaptation. So it's that mixed approach, that sweet spot, the balance between the two. That's the main thing. And then about how a bit more how I'm going to approach the session, talking about combat sport athletes. From my point of view, when you're doing combat sport, especially boxing and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you have very tight muscles, especially your lats, your backs, and the shoulders. So when you have limitations in your flexibility and mobility, you're more susceptible to injuries. I'm not saying that you will get injured 100%, but you're more likely to get injured. So in terms of that, I'm going to start the session by getting the body warm. I'm going to start doing some mobility exercises, typically for the shoulders, for the spine, and so on. And then if we're talking about, let's say, that boxer who is fighting in 5 weeks, as you said, we need to be already working on speed and power. So I will start with 3 to 4 exercises for speed and power, and then we do 2 at the end for strength. So for example, let's say on Monday, I typically think that Olympic weightlifting is great, as Alex said, for explosive power and so on. But a lot of athletes, they're not prepared to do Olympic weightlifting. First, it's a very difficult exercise, very difficult exercises. We need a lot of technical understanding about those movements, and also you might not have enough flexibility and mobility. But you can be doing not a complete movement when you're catching the bar, but you can be just doing some different pulls. So my favorite exercise is the jump stroke. The jump stroke, essentially, if you're staying upright, you're grabbing the barbell with the clean grip, you're lowering the barbell up to the knee, then from there you're just jumping in the air and shrugging. Very simple. You have to say only 2 cues to the athlete, and he can already do this exercise super good, super effectively. And the research says that actually the jump stroke it can produce greater peak force and peak velocity than the other weightlifting exercises. So I don't see why people aren't using this exercise as well. And then we do a few more special exercises for the boxer. You might do medicine ball throws and slams. So, for example, if you're facing against the wall, you can mimic that cross, that rear hand. You're stepping in, you're throwing the medicine ball in the wall. You can also do some rotational throws to the wall, which is going to mimic now both the hooks, the rotation punches, and the rotation strikes. Then you can finish off with 2 exercises for strength, because you also have to maintain your strength. Because if you lose your strength, you're also going to lose your speed and power. So you might do 1 squat exercise and 1 push exercise. Then on Friday, again, you start with 3 power exercises, and you finish with 1 hinge and 1 push exercise. And that is basically the nutshell your training program. I know this is very basic, and this advice might not be appropriate for everybody, but as Alex says, it depends on a lot of factors. So I think in nutshell, that's my point of view.
Good. Thank you. So now let's have a turnaround. And to be fair, especially in Portugal, in England, you have that kind of people too. So most of the people that really do sports and resistance training, especially when they are getting older, they go to the gym. So let's imagine someone that wants to get bigger or leaner, and they do football or paddle or other sports. So what we have now is, what kind of things would you say and focus on a person that would go to the gym and say, okay, I want to get bigger. I also do an extra sport, but my main goal is to get bigger, so hypertrophy training. So how would you manage someone that his main goal is hypertrophy and he plays another sport that he wants to keep doing it, so we don't want you to take out from his weekly plan? How would you focus now on that kind of person? So instead of an athlete, focus on getting bigger, better in this sport. You have someone that wants to get bigger but do an extra sport and wants to keep it. Okay, Vasil, what you have to say?
Okay, there are a lot of things that we have to take into account. First of all, I would say we have to choose again how many time we can spend per week to train. I would say either athlete is going to focus more on the resistance training in gym and the hypertrophy and less on the sport practice. He can probably train 3 to 4 times a week. If it's 4 times a week, I think my favorite way to do it is upper body and lower body splits. So let's say Monday, Tuesday, then Thursday and Friday. Yeah. Or if it's going to be let's say 3 times a week, I'm going to do upper body, lower body split, and 1 full body workout at the end of the week. Then on that full body workout, I want to emphasize on the weaknesses of the athlete. For example, I will focus on the more important exercises. I might do 1 squat, 1 hinge, 1 push, and 1 pull. But for example, if somebody has a strong bench press, a weak overhead press, I'll probably focus on overhead press on Friday, because this way he can train this exercise and this movement twice a week, which is going to have greater gains, right? So that's kind of my way of thinking. About the exercises, I would say, first and foremost, there is a lot of evidence in research that says that normally free weight exercises, they have better transfer to the actual sport practice, right? So, for example, if you compare machines and free weights, there's a big difference. There's evidence that suggests that when you're improving your back squat strength, obviously in the legs and in the hips, you can improve also your jump height, your speed, and your power, and so on and so on. But this is not necessarily true for isolation exercises, like for example the knee for the knee extension, right? Compare how much weight you can move with the knee extension and how much weight you can move with the squat, and also how much muscle mass you can activate. So I think, in my opinion, it's best to focus on big compound exercises and on free weights. That's it really. That's just the basics done well. Because again, although you can train 4 times a week, you probably won't get great results for your sport if you're doing the typical bodybuilding splits of arms one day, shoulders the next day, legs on the fourth day, and then I don't know, ups and back on the last day. So I think this split, upper body, lower body, or mixed split with whole body movements is probably the best way to address it. Let me just go here for my notes. I have some things I want to say. Yeah, about the exercises, as I said, free weights and compound movements. There are a few fundamental movements that everybody needs to have in their training program. And then based on the fundamental movements, you can choose exercises. For example, the first two will be the squat and the hinge. You can do whatever squat you want to do. You might do a goblet squat, you might do a front squat or a back squat. For the hinge, you might do RDL or hip thrust, whatever, you know. And then for the pushing and pulling, I think you have to have vertical, you know, pushing, let's say the overhead press, and horizontal, which might be dips or bench press. The same goes for the pulling. So we have like a lat pull down or chin-ups, which is a bit of vertical pulling, and horizontal might be bent over rolls or barbell rolls or whatever you might want to use. So I would say that will be the key exercises. Now, for example, if you're talking about combat sports again, although I said we should normally use a lot of isolation work, you still gonna have some of them. You know, you can't completely shut down the isolation work, but you have still to address it. You know, because a lot of the exercises we do to, let's say, reduce the, for example, for the boxing, you might do a lot of external rotations of the shoulders and so on, because you always have internal rotation because you're in this guard, you're punching a lot, so you might do a lot of external rotation, right, of the shoulder to keep your joints safe. And for grappling, I would say, now a lot of people might laugh, but I think that biceps curls are a really good exercise for the sports of grappling, like maybe even judo, wrestling, and BJJ especially. Because, for example, if you're in your stance, you're always here. You have this bent arm position. You're always pushing and pulling. You're grabbing. So, in my opinion, when you have stronger biceps, it really helps. I mean, focusing on bigger muscle groups is important, but you still have to have some kind of isolation work as well. So I think that's it really, Michelle. Let me see again if I missed something. Yeah, I think the last thing I have to just say is that, again, that comes again to our competitive year and the phases. If we are early in our competitive calendar year, we are further away from competition. That's when it will be the phase where we're doing more of these hypertrophy exercises, like high volume and lower intensity and so on. But we have to use very basic exercises. Then when we go to our special training, let's say 1 or 2 months out of competition, then we go to special exercises and we're working more on strength and on speed and power. So just because you want to, let's say, increase your muscle mass and your hypertrophy, it doesn't mean that you need to be doing this throughout the whole year. There's certain systems that we use that we kind of go from very basic to very special, to very specific exercise to the sport. So we just have to keep this in mind, again, which part of the competitive year you are, so you know how to address everything properly. And then the last thing, we know that volume is the key driver for increasing your muscle mass, right? So if you're a relatively unexperienced or you're a new athlete who is now getting introduced to weight training, I would say start with 2 sets, right? And then progressively work your way up to 3 sets per exercise. But then if you're more advanced, if you have 2 or 3 years of resistance training, I think 2 or 3 sets, it won't really make it for you. You need to adjust it more, so you have to take more volume. So then I would recommend trying to improve to 4 or 5 sets per exercise per session. Yeah. So I think that's it really. So if the volume is the key driver for adaptation for muscle mass, we have to make sure that our volume is enough.
Thank you. Alex, what do you have to tell us? So we have a guy that his main goal is getting bigger, and he also do an extra sport, but it's just for fun. How would you manage his training so he could keep doing his sport, but you really get close to his goal that was getting bigger?
Okay. So I think Vasil, first of all, summarized very well. I'll try to bring up a few more things just to add on top of what he already mentioned. So I think for me, one thing which is overlooked most of the time is dedication. That should be the first thing. If people are not dedicated, they won't achieve anything. Doesn't matter what the goal is. And I think people need to realize that whatever session, whatever type of program they decide to follow, it is a long process for most people, unless they're genetic freaks or they're taking performance enhancement drugs. I don't see them progressing too quickly. So then they need to be obviously they need to understand that it takes time and they need to keep it up. And then the next thing that I would try to emphasize more on the nutrition side. So a lot of people, when they might do the training properly and everything is fine, but I've had that myself, and I know a lot of people who've had the same issue, is that they don't track or take into consideration their macros, macronutrients, or calorie intake as much. So then I think that must be followed strictly if you want to reach your goals. So obviously, people need to ask themselves, am I getting enough protein in? Am I still getting enough carbs to recover? Am I getting enough calories to either maintain or gain weight if that's their, goal, which they have in mind? Now, personally for me, I think I've roughly remained the same weight for over 4 or 5 years now at least. But I think my body fat has gone down just because I've kept up obviously different intakes of macros solid. And then what I've done is I've burned fat but I've gained muscle. But again, that takes time. People need to understand that. So it's worth obviously looking into like macros and calorie requirements if people have the opportunity to. So not just look at the physiology side of the workouts, which is the exercise selection, but if possible, touch a bit on the nutrition side as well, because things kind of they work together. So if you screw up one thing, then it's going to be very hard to compensate with the other. So that's just one thing I want to touch on. In terms of programming variations, Vasil did a pretty splendid explanation of how they should be. But in terms of exercise selection, which exercise should you do first, or should you do lower body first and upper body? Again, it depends. However, there's one quote I would like to mention, which is everything works, but nothing works forever, which is mentioned by Louis Simmons, who, from as far as I know, is both a highly successful strength and conditioning coach and a powerlifting coach. For people who do lifting sports powerlifting, they might know him. It's more likely for them to know him because that's where he was able to reach his fame. Um, his gym, Westside Barbell, you would only see the best powerlifters in not just in the US, but the best powerlifters in the world. And you only get inside the gym if you have an invite. So you understand how well he understands everything. And even he himself says, look, there's not a golden standard to this program is perfect for everyone. It's obviously it does vary, and people need sometimes to try different programs, see if that's for them. Coming back to Vasil's statements, I think people still need to follow the hinge and squat pattern in the lower body, the push and pull with the upper body. That doesn't need to change because, like Vasil mentioned, in terms of research, that's what sports scientists and stagnation coaches have realized is probably the best method to implement. And then obviously, then you can have variations after you've implemented that correctly. Simply because different methods work better for different people. So there's never you can never say, oh yeah, this program is perfect because it might be perfect for you, but it might not work for other people. And I've had this problem with myself and with people I've given programs to as well. And I've had these discussions and I've realized that you need to understand that. And besides, first of all, it takes time. Second of all, it might not work that good as you as for other people. Obviously, one thing I'd like to highlight once again, that again, Vasil did a brilliant job saying, if you want to do your sport and progress in the sport, but obviously gain weight or mass or whatever, or just become stronger, increase muscle mass, decrease fat, you might be better off not doing, I call them, or other people call them, role split routines, again, bodybuilding type of workouts, which means that you shouldn't train one muscle group per session. Instead, you should focus on, like I mentioned, alternating upper and lower body, because that makes it easier. Because I've personally had friends of mine who, let's say they stopped doing basketball as often, still did a little bit, but then they started doing like bodybuilding sessions in the gym. Obviously, they became, don't get me wrong, they reached their goals, they became bigger and started looking great. But then they couldn't play basketball because they always feel fatigued. They're like, oh, my bicep hurts, I can't shoot, I can't pass. And it's like, if you want to enjoy resistance training in the gym and, you know, become bigger, become fitter, and still do your sport, then you need to understand that both split sessions or bodybuilding type routines might not work for you. So it's important to understand that if you want to do both things. If you just want to stick to like working on your body and you want to stop doing sports, that's fair enough. But again, it's about finding the balance, because trust me, there's one of the worst thing is to have muscle fatigue in just one muscle group and trying to play a sport. It's a nightmare. So if people can take consideration that experience, I think they should definitely try to do that. Because obviously we want to keep the enjoyment for both resistance training and sport sessions, just because, again, I've had those problems. In terms of exercise selections, I think Vasil gave out pretty decent examples, and basketball is the same thing. For example, when I did even sport-specific sessions, I think one thing which I missed on was external rotation, because in basketball, when you're crouching down and you're leaning forward, similar to grappling sports, you kind of keep you kind of shake your shoulders forward. So I think external rotations is one thing. Is I think transferable to most sports, not just combat sports, but a lot of team sports as well. And just like Vasil said, people might think bicep curls are like proper bodybuilding type of exercise, but in different sports, especially basketball, handball, or water polo, you still need to use your arm muscles to throw the ball in certain ways. Stating those muscles on the arm is definitely a great benefit. And again, just like Vasil said, sport-specific programs need to focus mainly on big movements. So, for example, when I did basketball and sport-specific sessions, for lower body, I had mainly back squats, deadlifts, Bulgarian split squats, barrier machines. I think I had a bit of leg extensions. I can't tell you why, because back then I had no idea what a group program looks like. So I just kind of followed what my friend told me. Obviously, and again, upper body, I remember the bench press, rows, traps, biceps, no machines, by the way. And those were the things I kind of stick with. And again, that helped me with my sports performance, and then made me stronger in my sport at the same time. So again, I think that's the biggest thing, just to realize those small details in terms of planning.
Yeah, that's it. I think both of you touching a few important points in terms of the consistency, and even, for example, Vasil spoke a little bit. Even if you want to get bigger and stronger, you can still focus in some kind of sport-specific movements. And Alex touched a really good point in terms of, don't forget that when you are already practicing a sport and you went to the gym to do something more, to get bigger, let's say, you need to look to your nutrition too, because your daily life probably will change, your necessities in terms of macros will change, and you have to have that small focus on that small details, that not just to get as close as you can to your goal, keep practicing the sport and avoid any kind of injury. So guys, here to finish a little bit, I will give you a more specific scenario. Okay, so let's say that some guy entering the gym is, let's say, on average person that you can see on the daily basis, and you want to get leaner. Okay, so a little bit more tone, and he says, okay, I can train 3-4 times resistance trainings per week, but I'm already doing some. In Portugal, football is quite famous, so a lot of people do once or twice a week, like a leisure thing. Like, okay, I play with my friends on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I would like to do some resistance training because I want to get fitter, not just because of football, but because I want to avoid to get fat and I really need to get stronger. So how would you organize a little bit that? So you have a guy 3 times per week to do resistance training, and he plays football twice per week, okay? And his main goal is to get leaner and toned. What kind of tips and that small focus would you do? So if one of you want to start to speak, feel free, okay? I will give you more space here to discuss.
I just want to say I don't mind starting first, because Vasil started first on the last topic. So essentially, because I know he would have a lot of things to kind of add to what I'm going to say, but I'll try to kind of add whatever I can from my side. I think what people need to realize is whatever they're doing, whatever the goal is, they need to be consistent. I think that's the first thing, because people always ask me, what should I do to get abs? What should I do to get bigger biceps? I mean, fair enough, like, I understand people want to reach their goals, but they need to understand that these goals take months, maybe years in some cases. So people need to be consistent. They shouldn't just. We know such people who try to get a beach body for 1 month, 2 months, here within 3 months. Doesn't happen. I mean, for some people it might do if they're very extreme and genetics are fine. But again, they need to be patient, and there needs to be an all-round process, not just, well, I'm just going to do this 3-month ab workout routine, whatever, and then I'm going to get abs. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it takes time, it takes devotion. So I think that's the first thing people need to consider. I think it's a good thing you mentioned that the example of football. Now, again, people need to understand their sport. How often will they play the sport? How fatiguing that is. if let's say football they play five-a-side, like in a smaller pitch, then they might not necessarily get that fatigued. But if for whatever reason they play, I know people who, even amateurs, they play in on big proper football pitches once or twice a week. That's very fatiguing, especially if you're not a professional footballer. So people need to understand the sport and the requirements. So because I've done basketball and I know for a fact you can do as many, you can switch players up and down all the time. Even in amateur leagues, you can sit down for 5 minutes, play for 10, so you recover, and obviously it's a bit easier. So people need to understand how fatiguing this sport might be. And similar to, let's say, combat sports, I'm sure Vasil's going to touch on that more. But are people doing amateur fights every week, or are they just sparring for fun and keeping a low intensity? So they need to understand that. And obviously, that even if they're amateurs, if they play, let's say, Sunday league and they play every Sunday, are they in the season? Do they have a game every Sunday? Are they post-season when they have maybe some tournaments? Let's say if their team is decent and they need to play a couple of matches, like maybe 1 or 2 matches or more 1 week, they need to understand how to kind of combine the resistance training sessions or hypertrophy sessions with their sport. And obviously, if they're off season and they just play for fun, maybe they can get away with doing more. So it's not going to fatigue them when they play the sport, and chances of injury are not going to be that high. So in terms of organizing training sessions, people need to understand this. How can they train? In terms of, can they train in mornings or afternoon? Can they, for example, do a morning gym session or afternoon play their sport? Or obviously, if it's easier for them, they can have, in the case of football, have 2 or 3 football games as like cardio, and then there is the other days where they don't play football, they can just do the normal sessions, and just to avoid getting overly fatigued in one day and overly exhausted. Because I know, for example, this is a example from a professional team, but one of the teams I was working with, they, for example, would have breakfast, go on the pitch, and then have a light lunch, and then go down to the gym and do a session. Obviously, some cases they might go straight to the gym after the pitch, or vice versa. But obviously, that's more to the coach's side. But same as people, if people can do gym or football session one thing, then do the other, and it doesn't tire them, fine. But just consider, would it be easy if you do one thing early in the morning, one thing late in the afternoon, or just doing it? I think separate days is easier as well. Just consider that. I think a lot of things that people miss on, like Vasil mentioned earlier, people go to the gym and do the same thing, and nothing changes, and it's like it literally looks as though they're wasting their time. Now, I feel that people should have a plan. They should have a proper program or understand what they're going to do. Because from my experience, when I used to be like a young teenage boy who wanted to get fit, I would literally go in the gym. I had a friend of mine who used to come with me, and we would just be like, what are we training today? Let's say chest. And we'd be like, we're on the spot, just figure something and be like, oh, let's try this out. A guy there tells you, oh yeah, this exercise is good. And you're like, okay, let's try this one. Obviously, it's fun and it's engaging, but in the long run, you have no idea why things work or why they wouldn't work. So it's important to establish a plan. And even if it's the same thing for 1 or 2 months, you need to know how to do it, and have short-term and long-term goals. I think it helps with motivation as well, because I think that's an issue a lot of people having at the minute, especially with the pandemic, or even outside the pandemic, people have always had it. If possible, people should track their progress any way they can. My advice is track your percentages of 1 repetition maximum for the bigger lifts. I think that makes it easier. So then if it starts feeling, let's say 80% of your 1 rep max bench press, if you start off as, I don't know, 4 reps, then start doing 6, and at some point 8 reps feel easier, then you're clearly getting stronger. So I think that helps with motivation and understanding your progress and how it works. And I think that's something I used to mess on for years. I mentioned that I've done 9 years of resistance training. The first couple of years, I never focused on percentages. I started doing that a couple of years ago, and then that's when I felt that gains start to come up when you understand how to progress yourself. Obviously, if people just go for let's say if it's a very average person who loves playing football, but then also likes going to the gym a little bit just for the endorphins, and they don't necessarily need to do that. They can just keep it simple and don't stress themselves out. Just do a little bits and bobs. But if they want to actually gain something from it, like you said, maximize it, they need to track their progress, just understand where they're at and where they can progress. The last thing I will touch on, which is more for people who are more experienced, more advanced. There are two things they can adapt, two methods. First thing is accumulation, which could be drop sets, force repetitions, pre and post exhaustion, which I'll talk more about in a second. And the second thing is intensification methods, which could be cluster sets, partial range of movement exercises, and eccentric training. Before I start going into detail, now both things need to be implemented cautiously, because I personally wouldn't do them if I don't have at least 3 or 4 years of resistance training. That's consistent experience, just because they're very taxing on either the nervous system or the muscles or on your neurons. So you need to obviously think first, is this for me? And is there a point of me trying that if I haven't even covered the basics? Like I still mentioned, if people haven't mastered the fundamentals, then there's no reason why they should try fancy stuff and risk injury or overtraining and so on. Absolutely no point. So for the examples I mentioned, I'll give some examples just so I'm clear on what I mean. So for example, if we have drop sets, one way of doing it is to have, just like Vasil mentioned, you can have, let's say, 4 sets per exercise, per session. So what you could do is do first and second set with 8 reps. Third could be a 6. That would be 70-80% of your 1 rep max. Let's say it could be a bench press. And then finally you would do 6 reps again with, let's say, 60%. But then you could also try to go over 6 reps. That would be a drop set. So the way to progress it is you can either increase some of the percentages of the working sets or add a second drop set. But I think that would be, let's say, 3rd week, where 4th week will be a deload. So you will only do 1 set. Which would be similar way it could be done for small exercise as well. Difference is you might have to reduce the percentage. So let's say if you've gone down to 60% of your bench press, if you do like a dumbbell incline bench press, you can, let's say, do down to 50% on your drop set, and obviously then try that on. The other thing obviously is forced repetitions. You would definitely need a partner or a coach to help you with forced repetitions. Now, understand that movements like back squat, RDLs or main deadlifts, you can't do forced repetitions. That's probably not very safe. So please don't do that if you ever decide to do it. What you could do is, if you decide to, I don't know, do a leg press now, probably not the best exercise, but if you do a leg press or a leg extension, you could get someone to help you, like force 2 or 3 reps. Obviously, it's hard to measure because obviously your intensity will drop, but those are just, again, all those things I'm mentioning, all the examples, they have their pros and cons, so they're not perfect. It's just a way to kind of test the muscles in a different way if you only have the experience and you want to try something different. Now, you wouldn't probably do more than 2 within 3 sets if you've progressed than like some of the weeks in the end of the month. But again, you need to be careful. You need to trust your partner as well. Now, I know people have done, and I've done myself, that reinforced exhaustion, where you might do, I don't know, a cable machine exercise for the chest and then pump up the chest muscles a little bit. Now, research findings are a bit mixed, and then it's hard to measure if that's effective, because you might just say, wait a minute, I've just been doing more volume, so that might be why I got the results. So it's hard to measure. So again, people need to be extremely careful if they ever decide to implement such examples. The other thing is cluster sets. So for example, I know Vasil loves those. So for example, if you're finding it hard to do 6 or 8 reps, but you really want to push yourself and do it, finish it, you could simply do 3 or 4 reps, stop for 20 seconds, and then do the other 3 or 4 reps. Again, that's very advanced, so people need to be extremely careful. I know some people do partial range of movement exercises, which again, people need to understand why they're doing them and is that going to help them. A good example for me would be, although I do Olympic weightlifting, I think if people want to be explosive in the core squat position, that might be for sports where there's jumping, like volleyball, basketball, also sports where you have power generation from that position where you're quarter squatting and you're just jumping. One thing which you might do is explosive quarter squats or push press, because in the push press you're just dipping down a little bit and then you're trying to explode up. So I think that might be one way of implementing it further and obviously get better in your sport. And the last thing is eccentric training, which if you haven't done it, it's very fatiguing. So please be careful. Again, I'm saying that just to emphasize how careful people need to be. I think Nordics are a good example because you mentioned about footballers. I think footballers, there is scientific evidence that if they do Nordics, obviously they need to progress it and start slowly. I think Nordics will help them strengthen their hamstrings, and then I know in some cases that might reduce the risk of ACL tears and serious injuries of such a caliber. So even if it's not sport specific, it could be let's say leg extension. So someone can help you lift the weight up, and then you can slowly go down, or even bicep curls. We mentioned bicep curls earlier. Someone can help you get up, and if you slowly start to go down, you will feel you will feel the burning sensation. And I think gymnasts, if you look at them, they do a lot of eccentric and obviously isometric as well. They do such movements, and to be fair, they have some big arms to show off. So I think we need to consider that in different sports they do eccentric training anyways because that's their sport. But there's no, people can still implement it in their own resistance training sessions. They just need to be careful and understand how they need to do it in order to avoid injury. So I think they first need to be educated before attempting to, try something on new. And yeah, so I got for you.
Right. Vasil, do you want to add anything more to Alex's tips and how would you help someone that can train 3-4 times per week? He just plays some football with friends twice per week. So what extra tips would you focus on?
Yes, of course. I think Alex made it very clear that you have to be very careful and very cautious what kind of training methods you are about to use. It's all about the principles. So if you follow the principles of weight training and how to, let's say, lose fat, lose weight, build muscle, and so on, what kind of method you use, that's not so important as long as you follow the actual principles. Saying that though, I think as Alex said, they might be very good for people who are more advanced, the isometrics and the eccentrics and so on, the force repetitions, drop sets. But for somebody who is now just starting out training, I think that would be very dangerous, as Alex just said. Because, for example, if you never step before the gym, if you just do only 1 or 2 sets, you'll be sore for 3 days. I guarantee the first time you ever go into the gym and you train even a little bit, you'll be sore like crazy. Everything's going to be hurting. You won't be able to get out of bed. If you start doing eccentrics and force repetitions and drop set, you're probably going to be screaming in pain, honestly. So that's why it's very good question, Alex, that you have to ask yourself, is this for me? Is it going to work for me or not? Most of the times, those advanced training methods, you can be using them later down the line in the future. Now, talking simply about our case study about the guy who is playing football twice a week and he wants to lean out. In my opinion, if you want to lean out, you have to follow the basic principles of basically following your diet. As Alex said, you have to be counting your calories, your macros, and so on. So, in order for you to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. There's no other way around, You can train as much as you can. You can train 7 days a week, twice a day, if you're not in a calorie deficit, you're not going to lose weight, right? It just doesn't really happen. That's just a very simple principle you have to use. Now, the problem with being in a calorie deficit is that we are obviously going to break down our cells, our tissues, and so on. So when we're in a calorie deficit, we tend to lose body mass. That's not only fat, we can also lose some muscle. So if you just want to lean out, you also want to have to do some training in the gym, not simply your being in a calorie deficit. So if you're simply in a calorie deficit, we're going to lose both fat and muscle. We have to be giving stress to our muscles, to our body, so we can at least maintain our muscle mass if we can improve it. Now there is a very controversial topic because some people think that you cannot lose fat and build muscle at the same time, although there are a few scientific papers which prove that this is possible. We can lose fat and keep build muscle as long as you do everything right. And there are a few things. Obviously, the first one being a calorie deficit, otherwise you won't lose weight. Second, you have to give stress to your body so you can build muscle. That will be high volume weight training, right? Because if you do very low volume, high intensity, let's say like sets of 2 or 3, you will increase your maximal strength, but you might not necessarily increase your muscle mass, your lean muscle mass. That's why 3-4 sets of 10 reps or 12 reps, like very high volume, that's going to work best for you. And then the protein intake, as I said later, that stress plus recovery because of the tension, we have to focus on our recovery because when you are in a calorie deficit, you're already in a state of stress. So you have to manage that. So the protein is really important. So typically, I would say if you're in a calorie deficit, you want to build muscle mass and lose fat, you have to have high intake of protein. So say that will be around 2 grams of kilogram per, let's say, per body mass. For example, if you're an 80 kilogram athlete, 80 kilogram person, you have to intake around 160 grams of protein per day. That's it. And also sleep. You have to really have a good amount of sleep every single night so you can recover and be fresh. Otherwise, I mean, pretty much everybody knows if you don't sleep, you feel horrible. Adding being in a calorie deficit, extra stress, adding training like crazy 5, 6, 7 times a week, and you're already being a mess, you know. So I think those are the key points I would have to say, about that. And I think these are just the basics of the basics, and if you do them well, that should be okay. And then the last thing about timings of your food or your meals, I would say for every meal, you have to have at least 30 grams of protein per meal. You can even go to 40 and 50, yeah? So you have to have, let's say, 3 or 4 evenly spaced meals throughout the day, let's say every 4 or 5 hours, whatever you might want to do, and then have equal amounts of protein. Because this is better than, let's say, having 110 grams protein at your, let's say, at your lunch, and 20 grams of protein for breakfast, and then later at the evening as well. You have to be evenly spaced out. And so, I think those are the basics. I'm not sure if there is anything I have to say. Maybe I think it's very important to touch on how important is to learn the perfect. I mean, look, they're not treating as a perfect technique because everybody has different body types, and then you'll be able to move in different ways. But you have to master the technique of typical exercise. There are a few stable components of every exercise that they have to be this way, right? So you can be more efficient, you can be safe, and so on. The biggest problem I see why people they cannot achieve their goals, as Alex said, the first one is they're not putting in enough time. Yeah, they're not showing up every single week, every single session. They're missing out. They're making excuses, and so that's the big thing. But second big thing is not training right, and in the result you're getting injured. For example, let's say if you go now and train for 2 weeks in the gym, and if you get injured on the second week of the gym, how likely is that you're gonna come back to the gym? Like you associate this place with getting hurt, with pain, with getting injured, right? So learning how to do the exercise safely, that's extremely important, and that goes for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're an advanced lifter, somebody who is new to strength training, if you're an athlete, if not an athlete, technique needs to be on point all the time. And yeah, I think that's it really, that's the basics. So start with very simple training methods. Then in the future, you can progress to more advanced methods. And probably the last thing I have to say about how to combine your weight training with your football practice, just playing for fun, you have to see how intense is your football practice, how intense are your football matches. For example, if you are playing football twice a week and then for 2 days you can't walk after the actual match, probably it's not a very wise idea to train 4 times a week in the gym, because you're already tired anyway and you can't really respond well to so much of training volume. But I would say, try to not play football when you have muscle soreness on your legs. Because if your legs are smashed, and if you start sprinting, running, and jumping, you're more likely to get hurt. So I would recommend probably do the legs training after or on the same day of the football game that you have planned, right? For example, if you, let's say, training on Monday, doing legs, you do squats, deadlifts, hip thrusts, calf raises, and whatever else you want to do, and you're playing football on Tuesday. If you're sore, you can't move well. Most likely, when you do any kind of overreaching to get the ball, you might overstretch your muscles, and you might have a little tear, let's say in your hamstrings or anywhere else. So I think you have to be very careful and very smart about how you organize things. But you have to follow the basics: so good sleep, good eating habits, and high volume weight training. And that's it, really, I think, in my opinion.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate your insights about the topic. It will be important for the people that try to mix the recent training with their extra sport and training that they have outside. So, changing a little bit for Portuguese. Pessoal, não se esqueçam, subscrevam o canal. Nós vamos continuar a dar-vos informação sobre o vosso treino, como podem maximizar os vossos ganhos e atingir os vossos objetivos. E como podem adaptar o treino, como neste caso praticam o desporto, ok? Há sempre formas de conseguirmos adaptar o treino ao indivíduo. Para tal, subscrevam o canal, estejam atentos à nossa página do Instagram, nós vamos metendo toda a informação disponível para que vos possamos ajudar o melhor possível.